Cool. All right. All right. Nobody is locked downstairs, or at least they haven't messaged me. So yeah, we can probably start. All right. So welcome everybody. It's quite a good turnout. I think in the middle of winter. So a lot of new faces. There's some new. A lot of faces I know. Some new faces. Happy to see everybody as always. Yeah, sorry for the delay with the meetup as well. I was overseas at the last date, so I had to just push it a month. But yeah, what I thought would be good is to do just a bit of a general update. There's a lot of things that have been happening, a lot of things people are posting, and maybe we'll have some discussion here as well. But yeah, this should be a fairly not too long of a meetup. But hopefully we can finish by 7 o'clock, and then we can always have the networking. Cool. So I'm gonna have updates on PHP as well as what's coming in PHP 8.5, as well as Laravel, and even a little bit of VueJS. So that's why, yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So we have a lot to get through. Yeah. Before I forget, yes, thank you to CG for sponsoring the event. Call for speakers. So we'll probably have maybe one more meetup by the end of the year, or before Laracon, I should say. So if you'd like to present on anything, let me know. That QR code is just to join the PHP Australia Slack server. If you're not on it, you can get it later from me as well, or it's also on the meetup page. Schedule tonight, yep, just one talk by me. Announcements. I just realized how annoying it is not to have this on my screen. I might just like stay in here or something. Okay, so yeah, we'll probably do one more event in September, October timeframe. Of course, in November, we do have Laracon AU in Brisbane. If you want to do a talk, let me know. I've already said that. I still need to sign up with Laravel meetup thing, like the official one. I've been, a little bit busy / lazy, but I will definitely do it before the next meetup. Yes, we are switching away from the website meetup.com. If you're not familiar, the reason for that is because essentially they just keep increasing their fees. They're quite substantial. So yeah, we're using eventy. We're also on the new PHP X thing. Yeah, the front enders meetup. If you're interested, I think it might happen next month. I'm not organizing it, but I'm talking to the guy that is on Thursday, so I'll push him to hurry up and organize it. And yeah, but meanwhile, if you use this QR code, you can join the front enders, not front enders, Australia front end Discord. So if you're not in that, if you're interested, scan this QR code. If you need more time, again, grab it from me later on. Yeah, cool. All right, so let's begin. So PHP, what's happening in PHP? So yeah, in my opinion, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but in my personal opinion, this is actually the biggest news of the last couple of months. Franken PHP. Who's heard of Franken PHP? Just a couple of people. Yeah. I'm not sure if you've heard of Swool or Swoole or however you pronounce it, or Roadrunner. No. Yes. Maybe. Yeah. So when like you might be familiar with Laravel Octane, right? Super high performance way to run Laravel, and in order to run it, you kind of need a different kind, like a newer kind of a server to run PHP, right? PHP FPM won't cut it, neither will Nginx or anything else that's kind of more front-facing. So previously, they supported like Swool, OpenSwool, Roadrunner, but so personally, in my experimentation to kind of set it up, I found it to be quite tedious, quite clunky to set it up, and I had some issues. So I really didn't like those particular like PHP runners or servers, whatever you want to call them, application servers. Yeah, Franken PHP, it's much easier to set up. And actually what's happened recently is that they're now officially part of the PHP project. So rather than being like a third-party tool, I guess, it's now officially supported by the PHP team, meaning that they're gonna, endeavor to put in a lot of effort to make sure that it completely supports PHP. There's no issues. It's easy to set up, first-party support, all of that stuff. And likewise, Franken PHP, so the company behind it, they're also like expanding their support for different kinds of PHP frameworks. So, it's not just for Laravel. Of course, I think Symfony was actually the first one that they supported. But they also support other projects like, say, your WordPress, Magento, many other things. Yeah. So in my opinion, this is really good. Why? Because now it's going to be much easier to support Laravel Octane, much easier to set it up. If you haven't done it already, um, understandable. Again, it was just not the easiest experience in my opinion. But Franken PHP is much better, right? It's much easier to set up. They have like an official Docker image. It's actually ridiculously easy to set it up. And in terms of performance, just use Franken PHP itself, so without anything else, it's about 3 to 4 times faster than PHP FPM. Now, if you run that with Laravel Octane, you're gonna get again another several times performance difference. So in your spare time or in your work time, however you want to look at it, I highly suggest that you try and set it up. I think you'll find that it's not that difficult. Or if you do run into issues, you can now get first-party support for it. Yeah. So yeah, my aim, I have tried it already, but not on any of our Cover Genius projects, let's say. So there's a couple of projects we have which are fairly, let's say, self-contained. Like they're not too big. So I want to try this setup on those projects, and potentially, if the moons align, I'll be able to report back maybe at the next meetup how it went, what's the performance difference, and all that. But yeah, I think it's really good. So like for those of you that have been in the PHP world for a long time, you might remember that before PHP FPM, there were all these like hacky ways to run PHP through Apache or Nginx, and it was just not a great experience, and it was not very performant. It was very difficult to set up opcache. There were like these unofficial libraries for it. It was just very messy, right? It was very messy. Nowadays, all of that stuff is much easier, and I think this development will make it much easier to run PHP with like Laravel, for example, or Symfony, like any framework with a tool like Octane. And it's just going to make that, let's say, the default setup for PHP much quicker, which is really good. Yeah, actually, any questions on this? No, just try it. Yeah. You still, you should still have something in front of it. Like Nginx works fine. In fact, I think they have examples of how to set it up together. And yeah, so I think the idea is that it caches everything in the thread before you receive the request. So you don't have to load up the whole framework. There's a whole bunch of other benefits to it as well. But like, for example, it supports the multi-threaded functionality of Octane, so you can have proper multi-threading even in the web request now. But that's partly Octane, partly Franken PHP. So basically, it supports the functionality that Octane needs in order to work, but much easier to set up. No, so as I said, I wanna try it. So I want to not just try, but I want to have it in production by the next meetup, and hopefully I can report back like what's our real world performance impact. Cool. So in terms of events, yeah, so there's 2 really big events that happened very recently, like in the last couple of months. And they were both kind of online events. They were not physical events, which are the JetBrains PHPverse 2025 and the Laravel Worldwide Meetup. Now, the first one is like a whole day-long thing, and they have multiple talks, so it's just like an online conference. The Laravel one, I think it's like 1.5 hours or something. But yeah, it's like quite a technical Laravel meetup. The reason I mention these 2 is that it's they're completely free, so you can go and you can look it up on YouTube, and I would highly recommend it. There's a lot of really good talks there. In particular, there's like, if you're interested to get into AI, there's a really good PHP MCP talk. Well, I think someone's calling me. Do you guys want to check downstairs? Thank you. Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, so there's a really good MCP talk at the JetBrains one, the PHPverse. So if you're kind of, if it's something you wanted to try, but if you're really lost, you're not sure, how does it all work? What does it mean? What's the terminology? How do you hook it up to an LLM? I would highly recommend that talk because it's quite introductory, and it's also framework agnostic, right? So you can use it for any PHP framework. Yeah. So what's coming up? So there's another free event, which is the Nuxt Nation conference. I don't know how many people here use Nuxt. I don't think it's going to be that many, but if you do, again, an online kind of conference that's free, you can register for it now. Yeah. So later this year. So yeah, of course, I think we were chatting about this earlier, but yeah, Laracon AU is in November 13, 14. I think it's like Thursday, Friday. Right now, you can still buy the early bird ticket. It's probably not going to stay early bird for long because it already has been for a few months. If you do get the early bird, what's the benefit? Well, first of all, yes, you get to save more money. That's one benefit. But yet you also get more social events thrown into it. So I think the first one is like introductory drinks the night before, so this Wednesday night, I guess, before the conference, and there's like a final kind of party event as well. So yeah, I think it's a if you are interested in going, like obviously you should buy it now because you get to save money and you get more inclusions in the ticket. I'll be there. I think Jane will be there. So yeah, highly recommend you go and represent the Sydney community. I think a lot more people from Sydney will be there as well. So a lot of people that from the community, maybe they're not here now, but they attend meetups every now and again. So you definitely get to see a whole bunch of them. Sorry, apologies. Just gonna to reply. I think somebody's a little bit stuck. There we go. Early birds close August 7 or when they run out. So August 7 is like what, 2 weeks essentially. Oh, yeah, all good. Sweet. All right, cool. Yeah, that's for the events. Yeah. Speaking of events, so why could I not be here last month? So I was actually in Amsterdam, and I went to their kind of like celebration meetup. There was like a little bit of a conference there, and then they had a big celebration. Why? Because yeah, PHP is turning 30 years old this year. So there was actually like a really big big meetups there. And I got very, very lucky because I won like what they said. I don't know if this is true, but they said it's like the last black PHP elephant. So that's quite cool. It was just like a lottery. But what was really cool about this meetup is actually I randomly, very randomly met like 4 of the core PHP developers, most of which are not living anywhere even in Netherlands. I think they're in Germany or Belgium, but they were all kind of visiting for this event. It's like quite a big event. Yeah, so for the first time in my life, I met actual core PHP developers. That's quite cool. As in they work on the actual PHP language. Yeah, and it was very interesting as well because yeah, they had a lot of controversial opinions about a lot of things. And yeah, for one, they really didn't like types very much, or at least they think you shouldn't use them to begin with as you're building a project. But yeah, anyway, a lot of fun discussions. I did ask them a lot of stuff. Like you might remember, there was a community website where people vote on the PHP RFPs. I can't remember the name of it now, but yeah, basically, I was just wondering if they look at that, and they said they don't really look at it. It seems like it's kind of died down a little bit. Like there's not a lot of people voting there. Another interesting thing is how do they actually develop the RFPs? So yeah, apparently whoever is the sponsor for an RFP, that person, they actually have to do all the groundwork to kind of implement a prototype, if you will, or like an MVP for that feature, meaning, to get to the RFP stage, even before you know if your thing will be, accepted, you have to do so much work. Like you have to put in so much effort to actually demonstrate the fact that this thing is possible in a PHP engine, that it can work. It doesn't have like a performance regression with the rest of the language and everything else. So yeah, I mean, these guys are definitely working quite hard. It was very interesting. Okay, cool. That's all for PHP. All right. So the main thing I wanted to actually discuss is the PHP 8.5. So that's going to be released in November, which is interesting because it's also when Laracon AU will happen. And now let's talk about some of the things in PHP 8.5. I tried to cover most of the things, but I might be missing like a few ones that I really personally didn't care very much about. So this is roughly in the order that I think how interesting it is. Yeah, so the first one is the pipe operator. You probably, if you did any, if you've looked at all at PHP 8.5, this is probably the first thing everybody's talking about. What is it? So if you use the shell a lot, you probably know exactly what the pipe operator is, and yeah, it's exactly that, right? So it's this little thing here, like a pipe and a cursor or an arrow, if you will. And all it is that it allows you to pass a certain value. This is probably not a good example because it's a string literal, but imagine a variable. You can pass it through a whole bunch of functions in an iterative way without having to redefine anything, right? So previously, you'd either have to have that, like that variable on every line, or maybe you have to nest it, and you probably have seen like something nested 4 or 5 times. And I absolutely hate that because it makes debugging very difficult. So now, yeah, it's much, much, much easier. You can do it much cleaner. No discard. This one is actually kind of interesting. I think it also will be a little bit controversial. So basically, sometimes you might have a function, and this one, it's a little bit difficult to imagine, but imagine you have a function that returns a result, but that function does something very, very important, and that result really should not be discarded, right? So this attribute allows you to enforce the fact that whoever is calling this function is actually taking that result and doing something with it. So for instance, if you have a function with that attribute and it returns something, and if you just run the function without assigning the return to a variable or without using it, for example, in a conditional, it's going to throw an error. It's going to say you can't do that. Or sorry, it's going to throw a warning, not an error. Whereas, yeah, if you assign it to a variable, for example, it'll work fine. So you might think, well, geez, when do I need this? It's probably going to happen if you have like a top level function which does something very important that's not repeatable, not idempotent, in other words. So for example, if you're doing something with external APIs, if you're doing any kind of IO, maybe you're processing and deleting your file, you might return the result. And if they don't save that result, it's just gone forever because you deleted the file. So something like that, where you have some externality, some kind of side effects, I think that's where it's really, really useful. And it's just an extra tool that engineers have to kind of try and prevent those kind of weird errors where you're not using the function correctly, maybe. So why, yeah, why is it controversial? Can anyone have a guess? Well, kind of, but I think like knowing some of the kind of engineers, I think they're going to be very eager to put this like on absolutely every function that returns anything, because they think that nobody should ever disregard any result. So I think it's another situation where you might have something that the language supports for like a specific use case, but I think it's going to be very risky in terms of people overusing it and just putting it on everything, right? And that would be very, very annoying as well, I think. So I think that's the main controversy behind it. It's just like anything, it's a tool, and it's good, but it should be used proportionally, not like everywhere. Cool. First class, is it first class callables? Yeah. So this is basically like imagine if you've ever defined a constant and you wanted that constant to be something dynamic like a callable. Previously it was not possible, now it will be possible. So fairly simple. And all it is that you're assigning the callable to the constant, right? You're not calling the function, you're just saying whenever somebody needs accesses that constant, it's going to be the callable of the function. Actually not that complicated, quite convenient, because yeah, if it never has to change, you might want to make it a constant. Just kind of makes sense. Attributes and constants. So again, this is another constant related thing. It's not like a too major of a thing, but all it is that you can put attributes in front of constants. And you might wonder, well, can't you do that now? Yeah, you kind of can, but the point here is that because the language formally supports it, you can actually get it from the reflection API of that constant. So if you want to know what attributes a constant has, right now it's not possible to do with reflection. It'll just not return anything, but it will be possible. Yeah, so you can, for example, let's say you're a library maintainer and you're deprecating a constant. That's like the classic thing. Yeah, now you can put a deprecated attribute on it. Yeah, using closures and constant expression. So yeah, as you can see, constants are getting a lot of love in this PHP version. This is actually an even better use case in my opinion. So if you've ever wanted like a static closure somewhere, now you can have it, right? So this is like one example. You could also have it promoted in the constructor of a class, class constructor promotion. You can now have closures that are constants. Now, these closures, they have to be static. What does it mean? It means they cannot have behavior defined by a runtime variable, right? So it can't be like, okay, if x is less than 4, do this. If it's more than 4, do that or something. But actually, maybe that's not the best example. But basically what I mean to say is their execution has to be predictable at compile time. So they can't have any unpredictability at runtime. But yeah, there's a lot they can do. And why is this useful? So it actually is used a lot in frameworks for things like validation, for example. Yeah, so it's like a really convenient little thing. Asymmetric visibility. This one, yeah, I absolutely hate this one. I think it's horrible, in my opinion. But basically, all it is that, right now you can, if you have like a class property, you can define visibility for it. You can say, is it a public, a private, protected, maybe. So this is that, but you're basically segmenting different visibility based on whether you want to read the property or you want to write to the property, right? So for example, what's a really common pattern is if you have a class and you have like a getter, you have a setter, right? Sometimes you might want to let a user read something, but you don't want to let them write to it, right? There are many use cases like this. In fact, I have them like almost every day. Super annoying. I usually just make it public because I don't really care. But if you wanted to be a really, really good programmer, okay, what you would do is you would make it private and you'd have like a getter method. Now, what you can do is you can make it private for set, but you can make it public for read, for write, right? Sorry, other way around. You can make it public, public to read, but private for writing, which is set. You'll notice there's nothing else here. That's just because everything is public by default. Why is that useful? It's just useful in situations that you want to avoid the boilerplate code of having unnecessary getters and setters. You can actually just define it on the property itself. And I think this is likely how people will use it. And it just kind of cuts down on the amount of code you need. So that's good. Why is it bad, or why can it be bad? So again, because you can just imagine that pedantic people will now want to put it on everything, and they're going to want to define everything very literally. And yeah, already like to define something in a class, there's a lot of stuff, right? So back in the day, you might just have class title, right? Now there's like public, static, string, class title, but now you might have like public, private, set, write, static, string, like whatever. There's going to be a million things to define everything. So that's the reason why it annoys me. But however, used correctly, it can also cut down on the amount of code that you have in the class, which is quite good. Does that make sense, by the way? Yes. Okay. Cool. Array functions. This is a kind of irrelevant to me because, well, it's been polyfilled in every major framework like Symfony, Laravel, whatever else. But yeah, PHP will have, and you might even be surprised, like, what, this doesn't exist already? And it's probably because you're using your framework's helpers. But it's just basically an easy way to get the first or the last element of an array. It's probably irrelevant, but it'll probably, under the hood, it'll make array operations quicker inside the framework itself. Yeah, fatal error backtraces. I had to read this one like twice before I understood what it meant, because I was very surprised it wasn't already the case. But basically, if you have a fatal error, which is uncommon, but yeah, this is probably one of the least uncommon use cases that I could think of, is that if you have an execution time, if your script exceeds execution time, you'll get a fatal error. Why do I say it's not common? Because other kinds of errors are like, for example, syntax errors, but that code will never make to production, right? Because it's a syntax error, it's like super obvious. But yeah, there is a category of fatal errors which happen at runtime. It's a very narrow category, but it's possible. So previously, in this case, you would just get an error like this in PHP, right? And you might think, well, what's the problem? You still know where it happens. Well, the problem is, I suppose, let's imagine you have a common library functionality, a framework functionality, and it does something that's time consuming. And if PHP tells you, well, the maximum time exceeded there in that thing, you know it's time consuming, but you also know it's used by like 10, 50 different things. What you really want to know is what called this thing that ended up taking so much time. Right now, this is actually impossible because PHP doesn't print a full stack trace for fatal errors. So now there will be an ini setting enabled, and if you do enable it, which I think by default, I can't remember if it's enabled, but anyway, you can enable it. So it'll print the full stack trace. So it'll tell you, yes, you've had this fatal error, it happened here. However, also here's the actual stack trace. So this is what led to the error happening. I think that's a really good improvement. I probably have rarely had this happen, but I'm sure it has happened. So, oh yeah, actually, that's a good point. So memory is definitely 100% something that happens actually all the time for like Q jobs. What's the ini setting? I think it's just that, which is the heading. I'm pretty sure. Actually, I don't remember if it's enabled by default or not in 8.5, to be honest, but just make a mental note. When it comes out, when you upgrade, you enable it, and it's gonna, make your life a little bit easier. Cool. So we're kind of coming to the end here. There's a few like really, really small things which I didn't bother making the slides on. So final on class properties, what does it mean? Any class property, you can put a final there, meaning if a class extends that class, they're not allowed to override that property. Pretty simple. I think we all kind of get that. PHP ini-diff, really minor thing. I guess it's more for if you're doing like server administration, although I think application developers should own the PHP ini anyway, but as an example, so we're gonna have this new thing in PHP 8.5, right? But how do you know that to put it in? How do you know to put it in your PHP env file, right? Well, maybe you know now because you've been at this meetup, but how does everybody else know? They probably don't know. So now there's this really good new thing called ini-diff, and it just tells you what's the difference between your PHP ini file, the one that you have loaded now, and the default one that PHP version comes with. And what tends to happen is over time there's more and more ini directives, and you kind of, you're probably not aware of every single one of them. And so this will tell you these are the things that you're missing, or maybe these are the settings which have been changed since the default. So that can be really, really useful, especially if you're trying to get all these little things perfectly right. Oh yeah. So yeah, this is a very, very minor one. I think it's just mostly for framework developers. But if you remember, if you've ever done this, right now it's possible in PHP to set your own exception handler, right? Meaning when an exception happens, it goes to that exception handler. What it is not possible is to get the current exception handler, right? I think that same function that sets it returns it, but that's like a very messy process. Like you have to like set a new one, get the previous one, check to make sure it's what you expect. Anyway, so now there's going to be a new set of functions to get the current exception handler. Not a big deal at all, but useful for frameworks, I think. And then there's, this one is actually really cool. I guess there are probably APIs, like things on the internet that can do it, but now it's built into PHP. So it's like the Grefim-Levenstein function. Does anyone know what that is? The algorithm? So basically it determines the similarity between two strings, right? So it tells you how similar two strings are. And it's like it's a really well-known algorithm to do that. So it's quite cool. What's really, really good about this implementation in PHP 8.5 is that it actually works across every single Unicode character set, right? So what does that mean? So for example, you could have the letter E, or you could have the letter E in a completely different character set, like I don't know, Cyrillic, for example. Yeah, Russian, but it wouldn't be the letter E, it'd be a different letter. But they are, they look the same, right? So the question is, are they similar? Are they not similar? Technically speaking, according to Unicode, they're completely different. But visually, they're the same thing, right? So this function tells you how similar two strings are, but visually, so it works across every single Unibyte character set. And I think that's really, really cool. And why, like, can somebody think, it's a quiz, pop quiz, what's a really, really good reason to have this function? What's an immediate thing you can think of? Sorry? Search? Yeah, of course, searching. Oh, that's a very good one. Yeah. Imagine you're, I don't know, you develop something where anyone on the internet can post in your thing. Like maybe you're doing comments to the blog or something. Why might that be really useful? Nobody was 12 years old. Yeah, spam. Yeah, so basically any kind of like censoring and spam filtering. Because if you've ever posted something on like a forum or a blog or wherever, you would know the old trick, right? So if you want to post some certain word, maybe it's not a very nice word. How do you get around the filters? You can use Unicode characters, right? So it looks kind of the same. This is the exact function which is meant to help you prevent that from happening. So anything where you're dealing with user input and you want to censor some, not very nice things, that's going to be very, very useful. Okay, cool. Last one. Clone objects. Yeah, who clones objects often? Anybody? Yeah. I've never seen any engineer at our company commit code which clones objects. I feel like I'm the only guy that ever does it. But yeah, but okay, one of the problems, not that I've ever had this problem, but if you're cloning an object, let's imagine it has read-only properties. Technically speaking, you can't change them because you've cloned that object. But let's say you do want to change it for some reason. Right. What's a good reason to do that? It might be something like SDK, which is a guzzle wrapper or something like that, and it has a read-only setting for like a host or something. You might want to clone it, but you might want to change that. That's just one example. So now, yes, you can do that now in PHP 8.5. It's like a super edge case, which is why I have it as the last thing. But yeah, okay, cool. That's all the PHP stuff. So you can look forward to all of these things around November. I think they're going to release 8.5. Laravel. Okay, so what's been happening in Laravel in the last few months? It's not a huge amount, to be honest, not a huge amount, but there have been some. I actually wanted to ask, does anybody use Tinkerwell? Nobody. Yeah. Well, apparently it's already version 5. I actually tried it. It's quite good. It's massively different because I tried it when it was like first released. It's completely different now. It's like way more advanced. But yeah, basically it's kind of like its own IDE. So if you don't have a PHP Storm license, so you just want something more lightweight, typically you would use something like VS Code. But now there is something really lightweight that's like specific for PHP and even specific for Laravel. The latest version has integration with MCP servers, meaning you can use your favorite AI tool. So let's say you pay, $20 a month for Claude or ChatGPT or whatever else. You can just integrate it into Tinkerwell. Don't have to pay any extra money. You can just use it there. Yeah, including like a prompt chat advisor, code completion. Yeah, and nowadays they do support other PHP frameworks again, like Symfony and others. So I don't know, if you want like something more lightweight than PHP Storm, not VS Code, you can try this. That's the way I would describe it. Cool. Yeah, this is actually a really interesting one because I really wanted to use it. But yeah, it's another interesting idea by our own team, McDonald. Basically, what it is if you ever had a situation where you need to get some kind of a value, you need to compute it or get it from the database multiple times throughout a request. You always think like, how do you do that in a performant way, but also a non-messy way, right? Because traditionally you might use something like static somewhere. You might have a class full of static variables, and you can do that, but it's like very messy. And then if you do that, you'll run into a lot of problems when it comes to the likes of Octane and whatever else, not to mention testing, right? So you don't want to do that. This is like a really good way to do that. Because yeah, typically you want to cache these things anyway. This is like an extra, how do you say, not a wrapper, but a decorator around the cache library where you can also memoize something, meaning you can reuse it across a request as well. How is it different to just using caches? You don't have to hit Redis again to get it, right? So you just do it once, and it actually, I guess it gets saved in either the cache library or the IOC container. And it persists across the request as well. So it's like an extra performance benefit over just caching something in a request response lifecycle. But Exactly. And there's no issues with Octane. There's no issues with testing. Like it'll just work. But then I kind of realized something, which is why not use this, because it basically does exactly the same thing. Yep. So if you're not familiar, I think in Laravel 12 they added this context thing, and it's basically just so you can save context on a request, and you can use it wherever you like. So you might want to eventually log something from a request. Um, you might want to share data across different parts of the code base. Yeah, user permissions. That's a pretty big one. But it basically it achieves kind of the same thing as this, right? And so I was just kind of wondering, like, okay, so should you use it? Should you do that? Should you do this? Like, what is the correct way to do it? And I came to the conclusion that you can do it either way. But I guess if you already are caching something, it just makes a lot of sense to do this, right? Because you're already doing the same thing. You're just adding an extra performance benefit. If you're not caching something, if you're not interested in caching something, obviously you also don't want necessarily, there's also performance overhead to cache things, right? Because you have to hit Redis. And if it's like a very large amount of content also, it might, chew up your Redis database. So yeah, in that sense, if you just really need something just for that request, probably this is the better way to do it. So I guess keep both options in mind. In different situations, you might want to use, yeah. Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. So this James saying this also gets logged if you do log it. Yeah, I think that's a good shout out. Is there no, anyway, we can discuss it afterwards. But for sure look into these things. They're quite interesting. Defer. Okay, so this one I actually really don't like this. I think it's horrible, but but I can understand why they want to have it in the framework. Yeah, so if you've ever wondered, how can I have a queue job but like immediately there and it's really easy? Okay, so you can with the defer and a closure now, right? So yeah, defer basically defers the execution. It's not technically a queue job, but it defers the execution of something until the terminate middleware. What does it mean is that after the framework responds to the API consumer, everything is already finished, the request response is finished. There's something called the terminate function in the middleware, and it will run any last things before it wraps up that, I guess, that thread in PHP FPM. And you can basically defer execution of things until that moment, meaning you're not slowing down the API request response. Though bearing in mind, you are still using up that worker thread, right? Whether you use FPM, whether you use Franken PHP, doesn't really matter. You're still using up that worker thread, the web worker thread. And that's kind of why I think this is like, to me, it's a little bit of an anti-pattern. I think it's like, if you do need to do that, you probably should be using a queue. You probably should be thinking about what happens if it fails, you retry, all of these things. That's the correct way to do things. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you can also do that with a queue job, right? Like that's kind of my point. Yeah, so I think it's, but okay, why would they want to have it in the framework? I think it's just to make development really, really easy, right? Especially for kind of newcomers. So it's like you can say, oh, it's a very easy way to not slow down the request. Yes, but there's other repercussions you need to think about. So I definitely don't recommend anybody use this, but well, it's here now. I guess we have to live with it. Migrate pretend. This is actually kind of really cool. I just learned about this like literally a couple of weeks ago. What it does is it basically it runs all your migrations, whatever it needs to be run as it would, but instead of executing SQL, it just prints it out. So why is it really cool? So it's kind of like a dry run, letting you know what would be the impact or outcome if you run migrations. It's also really cool because it runs all the migrations. So for example, in our case, we have like a multi-regional database structure, and we hook into migrations to generate multi-regional SQL. What's really annoying about that setup is that you have to run the migrations in order to generate the multi-region SQL. What's really cool about this is that you don't have to run the actual migrations, right? We can just run this, and it does all of that work very quickly. actually much quicker because it doesn't have to execute it. So a little bit of a niche use case, I guess, but at the very least, yeah, if you ever want to know what would happen if you migrate, okay, at least you can use it that way. Alrighty. Okay, a few more small Laravel updates. So this is like really minor stuff. So yeah, Laravel Nightwatch is like public now. It was previously like a kind of like a closed beta. Now it's public. There's a free plan. It's I think it's reasonably generous. Like if you just want to play around with it, certainly you're not going to hit any limits. And then even just for like $20 a month, you can have probably all your websites on it. It gives you quite a lot of requests. So it's really relatively affordable, I would say. Another kind of interesting thing that I realized last night when I wanted to look up the pricing, if you just Google Laravel Nightwatch, there will be 3 paid APM solutions that clearly bought that Google AdWord to appear in front of it or on top of it. So obviously there's like a whole bunch of these companies like, New Relic, Datadog, and I think there was another one. Like obviously somebody in marketing thought, man, this is like a competitor. We better do something about this. So that's kind of, technically irrelevant, but interesting within the scope of the ecosystem. Laravel Cloud, Laravel Cloud is becoming more mature. So like some news that I've read recently is MongoDB Cloud, like what is it called? Atlas. MongoDB Atlas supports it now. There's some Postgres cloud providers as well that support it now. So the integrations with third-party databases are rolling out if you want, somebody else to manage your database. And what else? Yeah, there's 2 tools that are about to get released. And actually, Laracon US is next month, right? In August. So I suspect they'll both be released next month at Laracon US. And these are Livewire 4 and then Filament 4. Filament, if you haven't used it, it's like a kind of like an admin panel for Laravel. We had a hackathon here recently, actually, like a few weeks ago, and I tried Livewire for probably the first time, and it was actually pretty good. Didn't mind it too much. So yeah, kind of interesting. And of course, the last one. How can I forget AI? Yeah, so there's a lot of AI tooling that's also been coming out for PHP or Laravel. There's the Laravel Claude Code setup. This thing is quite extensive. If you look it up, it's like a GitHub project. It's kind of like you know how Laravel has this new like a starter projects. So it's kind of like that, but it's just like a GitHub repository that you can clone. So just like back in the day, and it has like a whole bunch of stuff. So a whole bunch of stuff that the Claude people set up, and it has integrations with a bunch of services like Figma, which you will also generate. Like for example, you can use that to generate designs through Claude, and I think that's really cool. I've not seen anything like that, from like a Laravel package at least perspective. So obviously, like these AI companies are putting quite a lot of effort into like very specific developer tooling to help, well, I guess to capture the market, right? To help developers use their AI tools. But this one is like really extensive, like really extensive. So yeah, I was a bit surprised how much work they put into it. Symfony AI components. Yeah, so this is actually quite interesting. I guess strategically speaking, you could ask the question, why has Symfony done this and not Laravel? It's quite interesting, but basically what it is, so it's kind of like, I guess you can say it's a ground layer of AI components. So I think it's called the Symfony AI Initiative, and the components are the things they work on. And it's basically a whole bunch of tooling for Symfony to use different AI models, different AI tools, whatever the company is. So it's quite agnostic to the vendor, to the provider. It'll work with, I suspect, anything, but they're working on a whole bunch of these tools so that you can use, all sorts of AI functionality within Symfony. And I guess I suspect what will happen is you'll just be able to pull them into Laravel as well and use them if you like. But it's just very interesting that specifically Symfony is making a play for this kind of stuff, right? Anyway, that out of the way. That is quite good, by the way. You should have a look at that as well. Laravel MCP server. So what is that? It's basically kind of like a wrapper around PHP MCP server. What's PHP MCP server? So it allows you to integrate and provide context or functionality to different LLM models. talk on that during the PHP verse that I mentioned earlier. And Laravel AI Chat Starter Kit, that's like a much simpler package. It just gives you like it allows you to build like a simple prompt for an LLM from Laravel. That's a relatively small package. Cloud Code, relatively big package. But yeah, all of this stuff I think is quite interesting. So you can see like there's a lot of developments around AI. And I guess we're seeing how they trickle through to PHP, to Symfony, to Laravel. Yeah, definitely a lot of people are putting in a lot of work into all of these packages. Yeah. Anyway, I've said what I wanted to say. Okay, cool. Sweet. So we're coming up right on time. This last section, probably the smallest. But there have been a number of developments that I just couldn't miss. Yeah, so the biggest one, in my opinion, Vercel. So Vercel bought Nuxt, like, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, can't remember, very recently. I don't know if you guys have heard about this or not, but yeah, obviously it's like really, really big news. Vercel, of course, Vercel is the company behind the Next.js framework. It's like a meta framework for React. Recently, they've also been working on their V0, which is like an AI tooling for their frameworks. And I guess strategically speaking, it kind of makes sense. So they already own Next.js for React. What's the next most popular front-end framework? Vue. What's the closest equivalent to Next on Vue? So it's obviously Nuxt. So rather than having to build their own thing, they decided just to buy it out. How do you buy out an open source project? It's a very complicated question, but it turns out you can. And yeah, so Alexander Lichter, who actually works on Nuxt, he made a YouTube video about this. If you're really interested, you can probably watch that video because it explains it in more detail than I can easily summarize. But the summary, my summary is that it's nothing to be particularly afraid of. So they're putting money into it. Why? Because they're interested in the product. They think it's a good product. They do want to throw more money at it. What's happened is they've essentially given contracts to all of the Nuxt core developers, which is good. So nobody's like, fired or pushed out of the project, if you will, however you want to look at it. So they all signed contracts with Vercel. They're also putting money into like community packages for Nuxt, which is also, I think, really positive. So it's a little bit of a new injection of cash for those open source developers. And actually, one of my friends will benefit from that as well because he works on some Nuxt projects. So, overall, at least for now, it seems like it's a good thing. Again, strategically speaking, it kind of makes sense. They want to be the guys to work on and own all of these meta frameworks for the main JavaScript frameworks. And yeah, and I suspect they will probably have like a hosted solution for Nuxt very soon in the near future. Although it's still not showing up on their website, which is interesting, but okay. Anyway, so that's quite a big piece of news. Yeah, what's happening in Vue world? So I think we were discussing this. Yeah, actually, there's a lot of things happening. It has been a little while since the release of Vue 3.5, and I think there's probably two reasons for this. One reason is, a lot of the Vue team are also Void Zero team, and they're working a lot on Void Zero. The second reason is Vue 3.6. It's actually going to be quite a transformational release. In my personal opinion, they could have just called it VueJS 4, right? That's entirely possible. Why? I'll explain in a minute. But they're not doing that, and I think one of the reasons they're not doing that is because they want to maintain as much backwards compatibility as possible. So rather than kind of break everything and force new APIs, they just want to make new APIs available. But you can still very much continue using Vue as you have been, and you can still get a lot of benefit even if you don't change anything. Okay, so what are the actual changes? What's happening? So I think performance is the biggest focus, and I'll have some graphs, I think, on the next slide. But basically, you might have heard me mention that this is coming earlier this year when we had the front-enders meetup. But yeah, they're essentially implementing signals. They're using the fastest signals library there is, well, according to independent benchmarks. And they're going to use that for VueJS's reactivity system. because of that, you can imagine it's like quite a lot of work because they have to rewrite so much stuff in the reactivity system. Signals. So Signals is basically, it's been around for a long time, but people have kind of ignored it, I guess. It's a way to do reactivity between JavaScript and HTML, and it's much faster than, I guess, the traditional way that all the frameworks use now. And there's already been a package for it for Vue called Alien Signals, I believe. So it was already there to use, but I think most people would have never heard about it, right? Yeah, I mean, it is. They're calling it like an enhanced enhanced Shadow DOM now. But what it is, it's a quicker way to update the DOM. Yeah, it's probably like I could probably do a whole hour talk about it in itself, so I don't want to get into too much detail. But basically, it's a new paradigm for how JavaScript updates the DOM. It's not very easy from a framework implementation perspective, which is, I guess, why nobody has used it recently until I think Solid.js started using it. I think it was last year, and now everybody's looking at it again. So I guess of the major frameworks, probably Vue is the first one to try and use it, and we're going to see how that goes. But I suspect that's why they've been taking a while with this release, because yeah, it's not very easy to make it work. It's not trivial. If it were easy, it would have already happened, right? So there is all of that going on, and along with that is the VueJS Vapor mode. So Vapor mode is another huge performance increase. It's like basically a whole new API for developing Vue or Vue components, which is good, but it's bad, right? It's bad because it's a new API, so you can't just have it out of the box. But it's good because you don't have to, you don't really have to use it, right? It's completely optional. It's completely opt-in. You also don't have to convert your whole website to it. So you can convert an individual component or maybe a page. It's up to you how much you want to mix and match. What they're saying is, because when it comes out, it's still going to be, kind of like in testing mode, let's say. So they say, don't switch everything to it, but imagine you have like one page that's really, really performance intensive on your website. So that's the page you should convert to it, and you should see what happens. You should see what is the performance uplift. But don't go all in on it yet. But it should be very, very interesting. And yeah, essentially they have to do a lot to integrate it with Vue Core so that you can use it, but without having to use it everywhere. And I think all of the combination of these things is just taking a little while to develop properly, which is good because we don't want a whole bunch of bugs. So yeah, I think these two things have been taking a while. On the Void 0 side, so roll down beta is out now, which is really cool. What's roll down? It's like roll up, but better, right? So it replaces roll up. It also replaces ES build. And they say it's about 3 times faster than any existing Rust bundler, which is quite impressive. Otherwise, probably not as big of a update as the other ones, but yeah, component models are being improved in Vue 3.6. So there's a redesign of the component prop slot system. It's going to be much better for lazy instantiation. Why is it important? So imagine you have like, again, you have a page, and I think you can kind of see all these things are performance oriented. But let's say you have a page and it has a huge amount of components on it, right? And for sure, we have some such pages. But yeah, so in their benchmarking, if you're loading over 100,000 components, you can actually do that in 100 milliseconds with this new system. 100 milliseconds for over 100,000 components, which is insane. We were using, I think, Vue 2 even last year, somewhere towards, I don't know, the end of the year, we upgraded one of our platforms to Vue 3. And yeah, before that, there was like a page and it would take, I don't know, like a minute to load. It didn't even have 100,000 components, but you can see like the immense amount of performance improvements that they're squeezing out of JavaScript just in the last year or two. Like it's insane, it's crazy. So it's very good. It's yeah, like you can see web applications are really coming into their own, and you can have very, very complex stuff going on without having to worry, too much about performance. Oh yeah, of course. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, what is this? So I mentioned implementing signals, alien signals for the reactivity system in Vue. What's the performance uplift? This is a performance uplift. So the green bar, I appreciate, these things are a bit small. Basically, each individual thing is just its own benchmark. The green is 1x baseline of the new implementation, right? And the purple is the previous implementation in Vue. So you can see that there's a huge, in many cases, it might be 2 or 3 times performance uplift. Some benchmarks here, there's like only maybe, I don't know, 20% uplift, still good. Sometimes there's 2 to 3 times. Some benchmarks, it's like crazy. It might be like 5, 10 times as fast. So yeah, your experience may vary, but it's like a huge performance increase. I think that's meant to say miscellaneous. Yeah, so Nuxt 4 has been released, I think like 6-7 days ago, finally. And they're already working on Nuxt 5. They're saying Nuxt 5 might be released this year. Is that all? Man, I think that's all. It's very anticlimactic, but this is the last slide. Yeah. Sorry about that. I think it's meant to say finish or miscellaneous. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just gonna leave you on this slide. I think it looks much cooler. But yeah, okay, that's been a wrap, and we just 7 p.m. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna stop the recording. If I can. Actually, sorry, no. Before I stop the recording, any questions? We can do a little bit of Q&A. Nothing? Okay. Or maybe the questions are too raunchy for the recording. I don't know. All right, we'll stop.